City and Grass Valley. I call them like everyday action heroes that are here. It's like my tribe of people. And one of the things I love about this film fest is that it helps amplify the voices and the stories that are so important, and yet we rarely hear about those. I'm excited to have David Vassar here with us, who's Emmy Award winning, Oscar nominated, and just an all over awesome guy. And we're excited to have you here, David. And so, you know, we talked about the importance of sharing these stories. What did you call it? The propaganda?
The great thing about the festival is that it is about film, but it's more than about film. It's about how film can move. You know, how film can move a political idea or an agenda. And that's a very, very different kind of film festival. And it's very hands-on. This morning we did a workshop with John DeGraff, and, you know, like 60 people showed up at 9:30 in the morning, which is just insane. I wouldn't have shown up. There's no way. But yeah, so it's a festival it's a film festival for filmmakers, but it's also a film festival for activists. And it's a film festival for younger people who want to make films and see film as a mechanism to further an agenda.
So what was your workshop about today?
So the workshop today was do's and don'ts.
Okay.
How to make an effective environmental film that will move an audience to act.
And so how do you do that? What are some of the top 3 things? Like, because I know there's, well, especially now because we all have our devices and our smartphones and our iPhones, and so everyone's making media constantly.
Right, which is good news and bad news.
Yeah.
The good news is a lot of people are making media. The bad news is they're not really connecting.
So
and so
is a big one.
Yeah, and so I think that I mean, I've been doing this for almost 45 years now, and the critical thing is to create a film that becomes a transcendent emotional experience for the audience. And that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. I mean, if you think of all the media you see, and now it's a landslide, it's an avalanche. But, and try to remember the theatrical feature films and the documentary films, or a piece of music, you know, art is art, that really kind of moves you to the core of your soul. And that's really what the goal is. And so the workshop today was, you know, if you knew how to do that, you know, you probably wouldn't be at the film festival. You'd be relaxing around your pool somewhere. But there are certain things that you can do to try to connect with an audience. And there are certain things that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, what should we not do?
Don't preach.
Don't preach.
Don't preach. It's really not a good idea. The Chicken Little approach, which many environmental filmmakers...
Oh yeah, like if we don't do this and this, right?
We're going to die.
We're going to die.
Right, and you know, the fact of the matter is that there's so much media out there right now about the end of the world. You think the apocalypse is upon us?
Yeah.
You know, politically speaking, it might be.
Who knows? Yeah, it could.
But
that's not going to help. It is what it is.
Right.
So you can, right?
Absolutely, and you know, if you can inspire an audience to act without beating them over the, you know, if you beat them over the head with negative information, particularly right now, they're just going to turn the channel. They're not going to be engaged at all.
And then that just becomes more negative energy that we're putting out there.
Absolutely, and so what John and I were talking about today is to even though it may seem like crisis mode, there have been other points in history where things have been stranger. The Civil War and World War II, for instance. But you know, the trick is to find characters who are engaged with making change that can inspire an audience to say, well, if they can do it, so can I.
Totally.
Or inspire an audience to say, if they're doing it, I should be doing it too. As opposed to, oh my God, if I don't do something, we're all going to be dead.
Yeah. And the other part that's not as significant is the dying part, but just not to make a film so long. So that's what you were sharing earlier.
Yeah, well, let's talk about dying.
Yeah,
you could die in the projection room. No, I think that, what we were talking about was that for many, many, many years, there have been a couple of very, very time-specific templates that we as filmmakers always had to hit. If you wanted to make a half-hour film for television, it had to be 23 or 24 minutes. If you wanted to make a one-hour film for PBS or television, you had to kind of be in the 58-minute mode. If you were doing it for network television, you had to be in like the 44-minute mode. Yeah. Well, those constraints are gone. So
Yeah.
now there's no excuse. If you've got a film that plays really well at 36 minutes, fine. Cut it to 36 minutes, and streaming, it doesn't matter because there's no window anymore. And that's really, really, really liberating. And not to put too fine a point on it, but you know, many filmmakers, including myself, have been guilty of falling in love with their material
I know.
and not wanting to, oh, that scene was so
cut
great.
that out. Well, speaking of that, David, so what your project was featuring, right, wasn't it like compilations of your work over the many years? So you had to edit that and go through that. You had to walk down memory lane and kind of detach a little bit.
Yeah, it was a very interesting experience because as a filmmaker, you know, who the hell ever thinks about what's been? You're always thinking about what's next or what you're in. You never, I mean, you know, I've made 25 or 30 films and I've never in my life thought about, well, what's the arc to this, to my filmmaker's journey. Never thought about it. So creating this program that we did last night was like going through 30 or 40 titles and figuring out 8 or 9 that really sort of advance the story, and then finding within those films 6 or 7 minutes that were self-explanatory.
Sure.
Right, that were scenes that. So it was an interesting process. I don't wish it on my worst enemy, but it was an interesting process.
My last question is, David. So we talked about this last night, but the theme this year for Wild and Scenic is at the edge. When's the moment when you were at the edge and you knew you had to take that leap? Especially sometimes it feels like a leap of faith. Sometimes you have to take that leap to know in order to propel.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the ideas that I tried to express last night is, I mean, the program note was, you know, where does inspiration for an environmental film come from, and how do you transform that that inspiration into a film that actually moves people? And you know, it's really down to sort of the last slide in the show, which is, you know, it's a human being, it's an animal, it's a story, it's a character. And if you have the sensitivity to pay attention to the inspiration, and if you have the craft to make the film accessible and transcendent, then you can actually move people.
So what was one of your stories, though? I'm trying to get to your story, David, of your edge moment.
Well,
I liked how you walked. You walked around that. Yeah. There
were. We tried to put a number of them in the show, but I think the one that really sticks out the most is this was 1981 or 82.
Yeah, early 80s.
Energy crisis, price of gas tripled in a year, economy tanked, gas lines, and suddenly alternative energy was the right time.
Yeah.
And precisely at that moment, I was having my own energy crisis. I'd just fallen out of love in a long-distance relationship. I was in New York City. I went to the White Horse Tavern to nurse my sores,
wounds, yeah.
And I bumped into an environmental writer, rare breed at the time, and he said, you know, these guys up in Massachusetts, they're backyard mechanics and they're environmentalists and they're engineers, and they're building the largest windmill in the world to generate electricity. And I said, well, that sounds like a story. So anyway, I went out to the island, I met all the guys, and yeah, they were going to do this. And they built the largest windmill in the world at the time for the generation of electricity.
Wow.
And it was, you know, 25 years ahead of wind power and solar and all the rest. So you just had to jump in.
You have to jump in, and you never know when your wounds are going to take you to somewhere that could be totally amazing and magical.
Yeah, well, you never know where it's going to come from.
You never know where it's going to come from. You
never know where it's going to come from. And you just, you know, you have to follow your instincts, because really at the end of the day as a filmmaker, that's all you have.
That's all we got.
That's all you have is your instincts.
Instincts.
Yeah.
And you said too, like we were talking earlier about the march that's happening next week. Man, talk about going with your gut or instincts. And I know a lot of us are just participating because we're coming from that place.
Yeah, exactly. You just got to take the leap.
Taking the leap. Take the leap. Take the leap. Come to Wild and Scenic Film Fest. Take the leap and just take action in your own life, whatever lights you up. That is a great place to start. I'm Melissa Parker. Thanks so much, David.
You bet. My pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll be back in just a bit. David Vassar, everybody.